Hi, today we are discussing the basics of costing on the StarFront program. In the aluminium industry, for you to calculate the cost of your product that you are manufacturing, you have to consider three primary entities. Number one, the material cost. Number two, the factory cost. And number three, your installation. Once you can determine those three costs, you then know what that product is costing you to make and install, and you can apply whatever markup strategy you want onto that cost price. Now, to expand on that, your materials are made up of the following. You have the cost of your aluminium profiles. You have the cost of your aluminium components. And you have the cost of your glazing. One of the important things on any costing system is the ability to maintain your material cost prices accurately. One of the big advantages of the StarFront program is that the price of your aluminium profiles, the price of your components, that is things like your locks, your handles, your screws, your gaskets, all that type of thing, are automatically maintained for you. And StarFront automatically will update those prices according to the selling price from this particular Crealco distribution partner that you have chosen. The only item that you have to worry about is your glazing price. Because Vespeco does not sell glass, it becomes your responsibility to manage your glass file. Now that should not be a huge thing. When you get the program, it comes preloaded with all the standard glass codes onto the program. And as you use a glass code, you can just go in and put a cost price for that glass code. When you first start off with StarFront, it can be difficult to determine what your factory and installation costs are. So what we're going to do, we're going to start on a simplistic level, and we are going to say, ignoring our manufacturing costs and ignoring our installation costs, how can we determine a selling price? Well, if we take these costs and we call this our total cost, the aluminium industry works on a rule of thumb. Your selling price is equal to your total cost times a factor. In this situation, we're going to use a factor of 2. This factor of 2 will vary according to your particular company, according to what you are paying your staff, what your overheads are, and all that type of thing. Now please remember that this is just a rule of thumb, and although it may give you an initial guideline to what to sell an item for, it should not be your long-term costing strategy. And I will explain just now why we do not use this long-term. In other words, what is the purpose of this factor 2? This factor 2 is to say I'm going to take the known entities, which is what my profiles, my components and my glazing are costing me, and I'm going to add a markup and that markup must cover my manufacturing costs and my installation costs. Now obviously manufacturing costs and installation costs vary from job to job, which is why it's not a good idea to apply this across the board. But it is a good starting point. And particularly for those people who've just installed StarFront for the first time and urgently need to get a cost out of the system, you can work on this basis of total cost times a factor. And your factor might be 1.8, it might be 2.2, depending on where you are positioned in your company. Now, the more accurate way to work out your costing is to obviously take into consideration those other factors. So let's start off considering our factory costs. Our factory costs are made up of two components. It's made up of an amount that I pay my factory workers to manufacture the aluminium windows, plus an amount which represents my factory overheads on top of that. So in order to work out your factory costs, one of the most important things is to try and allocate an accurate amount of factory time to each window that's manufactured. And fortunately, StarFront does this automatically for us. If you design a simple casement window on StarFront, just a single window, and you go to your costing screen on StarFront and you say recalculate, you will see on a typical casement window, it might allocate something like 3.8 hours of factory time. Now, how does it determine this 3.8 hours? Well, that is made up of taking all of the basic functions. Some of those are manufacturing functions, some of those are assembly functions, such as cutting a length of aluminium, joining a corner, mitering a cut, adding a handle, and adding a friction stay, installing a sash. Each of the basic fundamental building blocks that are required to manufacture your window are totaled, and it represents that as a total number of factory hours. Now, first of all, what is important about these hours is these are man hours. And what do we mean by man hours? 3.8 man hours means if I took one person, it would take that person 3.8 hours. If I took two people, it would take 1.9 hours for each person. So two people working for 1.9 hours, total is 3.8 hours. And if I took three people, it would take just over an hour for those three people to make that window. So your man hours is the total number of people working on that job times how many hours it will take them to manufacture it. Now, once I know how many man hours that item is going to take, I can determine or allocate two costs to that. I have got what I'm paying my workers in terms of wages, and then I've secondly got my overheads. And these in particular here are my factory overheads. So the concept behind the StarFront costing is the following. If I say a window takes 3.8 hours to manufacture in my factory, it must cover 3.8 hours worth of factory time or wages for that staff, plus it must cover 3.8 hours of my factory's overheads. So for every hour that product is in your factory, it has to contribute its portion to the overheads of that business. Now, one of the first things you need to do to get StarFront costing accurately is you need to fine-tune this amount of time. And the way I suggest you fine-tune it is take a very simple casement window. Let's say something that looks like this. Let's say it's a 1200 window, and this window is 1500 high, let's say with 2 top-hung sashes. First of all, say to yourself, how long would it take if I gave my factory an order, I said, guys, please go and make me a window that looks like this. Let's assume I've got 3 people who are going to work on that. And right from the cutting of the material, to the getting the components together, to cutting the glass, to assembling that window, to cleaning that window, you need to work out or estimate how long would that window take. So let's say I've got 2 guys who are going to work on that window, and I predict they're going to take about 3 hours to make that window. So I expect the program to allocate about 6 man-hours of time on this window. What I do then is I go into the StarFront program, I quickly design a simple window like that, and I go to my costing screen and I push recalculate. And I see how many hours the program is allowed. And let's say the program only has allowed 4 hours for me to manufacture that. Okay. Then what I know I need to do is I need to increase each of the individual processes. The time allocated for doing a square cut, for doing a mitered cut, for doing a join, for doing a crimp, for milling the ends of a profile, for inserting a length of gasket. Each of those processes are defined in StarFront. You can access it through the configuration menu under the user configuration. And I need to take each of those processes and increase them by 50%. Then when I go and recost this window or recalculate it, it will increase all of my all of my factory labor by 50%, and I will come closer to my 6 hours worth of labor that I want. So that is a little exercise that you have to do to get your system allocating an accurate amount of time. Once I'm happy, let's say I've now fine-tuned this, okay, and on this job, on that particular window, the program has allocated my 6 man-hours. I need to work out what my wages are for those 6 hours, and I need to work out what my overheads are. And once I can allocate a cost for the staff that I'm paying and a cost for that portion of my overheads, then only do I determine what my factory costs are. So as you can see, it's a lot more complicated to get those settings done and to do those calculations in order to determine my factory costs. My material costs are pretty easy to calculate. My factory costs are now a function of the factory time, then that's split into what my wages are costing me and what my overheads are costing me. Now, there will be a future talk on the costing and how to go and set up your costing. The purposes of this video are just to give you an overall understanding of how the costing on the StarFront program works. The third item that we need to worry about is our installation costs. Now, that is probably the area of the program that has got the most unknowns. It is sometimes very difficult for you to say, well, on that window, think about the window we drew here, our 1200 by 1500 window just now, exactly how long it's going to take to install. It might be a function on which story of the building it is. There might be a big cactus bush outside there that I have to work around. I may have to put scaffolding up. There may be various factors. So one of the more difficult things to calculate is your installation cost. And for that reason, StarFront allows you many different ways of determining your installation cost. The way that we normally teach in the training courses is as you design each window, you will simply give an estimate of how long should it take for your team to install those windows. So one of the big differences between installation costs and factory costs is your installers are going to work in teams. So when we allocate 2 hours to install a particular window, we're talking about 2 hours for that team to install the window. You may have 2 people per team, you may have 3 people per team. All right, you can configure that however you want. But you need to allocate an amount of time that it's going to take for that window to be installed. So on this particular window, let's say we said, all right, we're going to allocate 2 hours for that window to be installed. Once again, those 2 hours are going to be broken into what are the wages that we have to pay for those 2 hours and what are my overheads. The wages become a function of what I'm paying my installers to do that work. And my overheads, now I need to identify what my installation overheads are. And that's going to include things like the vehicles that have to go to site, the petrol for those vehicles, the tools and equipment that are needed for those installations. A whole lot of the parameters are going to determine what these overheads are. And only once I can work out what I'm paying my staff and what my corresponding overheads for the installation are, am I going to be able to work out an accurate installation figure. So that is one method where you simply allocate time for a team to install each window. The program also allows you, for example, to do installation based on perimeter. If you can do a calculation that says per linear meter of outer frame on that particular job, I am going to charge, let's say, 100 Rand per linear meter. The program does calculate for you both the total perimeter of this job and the total area of that job. And you can take either the perimeter or the area and you can apply a factor to work out your installation. Alright, and you can also, if for example you are making use of an outside installation team, you can simply go in and put in a flat rate figure for that installation. So if your installer quotes you 10,000 Rand to do the installation, on your costing screen you can go in and you can put that 10,000 Rand for the installation. Okay, so I think you'll see quite quickly that to work it out accurately in terms of taking your factory and your installation costs into consideration is a lot more difficult than taking my total costs and multiplying it by some factor. Alright, so let's consider what the disadvantages are of using the simplified costing method. Let's assume we are working on a factor of 2. In other words, I am taking each job, I work out in total what my profiles are costing me, what my components, another name for components is hardware, that's all your locks and handles and hinges and everything like that, and what my glazing is costing me. I work out a total cost and I simply multiply that by 2. On a typical average job with no special glass, no special complications, that factor of 2 is not a bad estimation. Where it becomes a problem is if, for example, you've got a job with very expensive glass. Now what is happening, I am taking my material, my glass price, and I'm doubling it. And in the process of doubling a very expensive glass, I'm obviously going to add a lot of cost to that job. In other words, I'm going to price myself out of that job because my markup is meant to be taking my factory labor and my installation labor into consideration and allowing for them. But now, because I'm doubling a very expensive glass, I'm going to price myself right out of the market on that job. And I'm not going to get those jobs. Okay. Similarly, if this is a job, for example, a cottage pane casement window system, where my factory labor is much higher than it would be on a normal casement window system. My material costs are not that much higher on cottage pane. So now, by just adding or doubling my cost of my material, I'm actually going to be underquoting on that job. Because I am not adding enough extra meat on the bone to allow for the factory costs, the manufacturing costs, and my price is going to be low. So what happens is, if you follow this process long term, you're going to find that you're going to lose a lot of the bigger jobs with expensive glass, or an expensive finish, or an expensive system, because you are pricing yourself too high, and you're going to pick up a lot of the small fiddly jobs, like cottage pane jobs and jobs with lots of small different windows in them. So the proper way to do your costing is to take your material, your factory costs and your installation costs into consideration. But when you first get StarFront, if this is your first month that you're working with a program, it's not bad to start off and work on this basis. And in fact, what we encourage people to do is, even once you've got your program set up to work out your factory and your installation costs 100% accurately, you always keep an eye on what is this markup. And in fact, on your costing screen, it displays an entity called markup on material. And that's actually a percentage. So every job you do, it will say your markup on material is 105% on this job. So what does that mean? It means I've taken my material cost and I've marked it up 105%. 100% markup represents a markup factor of 2, or I've doubled it. So if my material price on this job is 800 Rand and I double it, I am going to charge 1,600 Rand. And my markup on material will be exactly 100%. So what we recommend is, when you're working with the program, on your costing screen, you just keep an eye on this percentage markup on material figure that is shown at the bottom, because it will give you an indication. So if by mistake I forget to allocate installation, then I will see this percentage markup will go very low. If I've maybe got an incorrect price, so I've got a price of glass, instead of 100 Rand a square meter, by mistake I put in 1,000 Rand a square meter, my percentage markup on material is going to go very high. So I need to understand what this figure represents and use it just as a double check to make sure that my costing is accurate. And you will learn for your business and your market and your overhead structure and everything like that, typically, where do you sit on most jobs in this situation here? Okay, the other thing which I need to talk about is, people get very confused about VAT when it comes to costing. Now, the simplest way to handle VAT, or to consider VAT, is the following. You never take VAT into your calculations. All you are doing with VAT is you are collecting it from one person and you are paying it over to the government. So your material costs must all be ex-VAT. Your factory labor, your overheads, all of those costs will all be ex-VAT. You're then going to mark up your product by a factor of 2, work ex-VAT, And the very last thing that you are going to do is you're just going to apply the VAT on. So don't take VAT as complicating the equation. You can ignore the VAT as long as you just take it and you add it on to the end of the system. Okay, now if we look at our three basic materials, this file is locked. Okay, you cannot add additional aluminium profiles to the program. That is because this program is sponsored by Wispeka, and Wispeka's core business is manufacturing aluminium profiles. So they don't want you to go and add opposition's aluminium profiles onto a system. You should not have a requirement to do that. But Wispeka very easily allows you to add your own components and your own glazing. And in fact, when we look at our profile cost is actually made out of two parts. We have the metal, the raw metal, which is in mill finished. Okay, and then you have the finishing, which your finishing will be your anodizing or your powder coating. And Wispeka even allows you to go and add your own finishing and manipulate your own finishing. Although they would obviously prefer you to purchase your aluminium profiles already finished, i.e. already anodized or powder coating, Wispeka doesn't block you. And you have the ability to go and add your own finishes, add your own components, and add your own glazing onto the system. So Wispeka being very fair and very flexible. The program doesn't block you in any way. You can manipulate it to manage the costing exactly like you would like to manage that costing. Okay, so I hope that short little video is helping you a little bit just to understand a bit about the background of the costing in StarFront. There will be future videos which are going to go into a lot more detail, but for now, that is the essential information you need to understand the fundamental costing in the StarFront program. Once again, thanks for your time in watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel, click on the notify icon so you're notified when another video comes out, and keep positive, keep safe, and we'll all get through this together. Keep well, bye-bye.